This is class 2, week 2 of the Empathy Dojo, and we're working with rapport. So I hope that your practice yesterday or whenever you watched that last video brought a lot of insight about when do we long for rapport. A lot of thinkers feel, my experience has been that that's a primary human motivation. We long for rapport. And also, as we learn, we long for presence. We long for presence. So this eventually can become something that we bring to ourselves and we bring to other people. Another name for rapport might be presence, but the interpersonal aspect of presence is rapport. And this is great for Zen and Vipassana types, reformed spiritual bypassers like myself, who have worked a lot on trying to generate presence, but may have lagged behind in the interpersonal realm. Well, the good news is in the interpersonal realm, what presence is in meditation is rapport or belonging in connection. I don't know, that just blew my mind when I first learned it. So we're working with rapport, and this week we've got a two-part training in rapport. The first was that we were just looking into that sense of belonging, of presence, of being together, and then looking into what we do instead. What did you find out? I find we fix it, we should, we explain, right? Sometimes you mansplain to yourself or to another instead of actually expanding the capacity to be together, to establish that open sense of connection first. Empathy first. It's quite simple. The idea of starting with rapport is creating that field of mutual belongingness, creating that sense of tapping into our underlying connection. So we looked at what we do instead, and now we're going to look at one of the most fundamental ways to create rapport. We're going to go through one of the most fundamental ways to create presence in yourself, to create a non-judgmental atmosphere with another so that we can start to open things up. That is this first step in nonviolent communication, learning to observe without evaluating, learning to observe without evaluating. This happens to be the same thing as Zen meditation and some of the elements of things like mindfulness-based stress reduction. So let's do a little experiment with it. It's this quality of it actually develops this sense of presence within us. So take a moment wherever you are and see if you can just be with what's going on, whatever's going on. So you can hear, so I'll do mine and then be quiet for you to do yours, but I'll give an example. So I can hear there's wind and machine noise from an air conditioner, right? Those aren't value judgments. Those are just accurate labels, right? There's wind and machine noise from an air conditioner. Okay, there's light here coming right in front of me. There's some coming down from above. I've tried to light this video to the best of my ability. That might be a value judgment, but there is the light here. That one's just an observation. You could get really detailed. You could go into sensations. So I feel a squishy sensation underneath my tailbone. I feel a firmer sensation underneath my thighs. If you don't want to get that detailed, you can say, well, I'm sitting in a chair with a pillow behind me. The idea is all of these labels are fine. None of them are value judgments. When I might get into a value judgment is I'm sitting into a crummy chair, or this room has really nice lighting. These are all value judgments. They're pretty benign. I mean, maybe if the chair was animate, it wouldn't like me calling it crummy. But they're pretty, the nice lighting in this room. But the trick we need to know for the work that we're going to do, it may not seem important yet, but we need to know it, is that these are evaluations, not just observations. Observation, there is lighting in this room. And then if I had a little light meter from my film buddies or something like that, I could tell you how much light or what the quality of light is. But whether that light should be that way or shouldn't, whether it's good light or bad light, those are all evaluative judgments. So take a moment, please. We're just going to sit, eyes open or closed, whatever, and notice what you can observe. We're using our self-talk. Make those observations within and try to stick with observations, not evaluations. Okay, what did you notice? A very active contemplation. It's not the same as meditation, but this is giving us a very practical Zen-like skill, which is when we start to observe without evaluating. This is actually a training that meditators do all the time. We actually lessen these two poles from yoga, which are aversion or attachment. So when we're not making observations, but we're making evaluations, we're usually, there are actually three. I'll get to the third one in a second, but we're going like, oh wow, here's this door, the observation. And then we add on, I like this door, or I don't like this door. That's not really a problem. We'll get to that with our emotions, with our values, and later part of this protocol. But the trick is to know when we're making an evaluation. Many of us, the way our language and our cultural sort of grooming conversations happen, the way those go is that they are laden with evaluations, and we think we're making observations. We go off spouting our opinions, and we think that they're facts, or we go off giving a person our specific perspective, and we think we're being polite, when in fact, we're bringing all this energy into the conversation non-consensually to a certain degree. And if we're in a more sensitive moment and someone does that to us, it can actually make us quite uncomfortable. So in developing rapport, a skill is to start with simple observations. And you may not do this. This can feel robotic. Your friend walks up to have lunch with you and you don't go like, you are wearing a dress. You might say, oh, I love your dress, but we want to make sure. So I chose those words very carefully. I love your dress. It's talking about my feelings and a little bit of my values in there. When I say something like, that's a nice dress, I should be aware that I'm making a value judgment. That's not usually a problem for some people, but some of us who, if you don't like getting compliments or you feel awkward, like, well, how do you respond to that? You may find out that it's because you don't enjoy hearing people's evaluations of you. It's totally different to say, for someone to say, I love your haircut, than for someone to say, your haircut is nice. One is expressing, oh, that I felt this way when I noticed your haircut. Another is they're telling you how you are. And if you are a little bit sensitive, for someone to tell you how you are it's a little bit impolite. It's a little bit of an imposition. Maybe that's going a little too far, but hopefully we're starting to get to just making the distinction between observations and this. You bring this kind of Zen-like presence. They do this in pain relief. I was just reading some research from a book by Dan Goleman and Richard Davidson called Altered Traits. And Zen masters, or long-term meditators, not even masters really, they have the same experience of pain in their brain, but the parts that are about your own resistance, the parts that make people feel pain more strongly subjectively, those are all turned down in long-term meditators. So there's actually something about our experience of pleasure and pain, our experience of reality, that is in our value judgments. Just sitting there and going, I don't want this, I do want that, actually increases the felt experience of pain. Pretty cool. So we're going to learn just to, oh, this is this and this is that. And making these observations is the foundation of skills such as reflecting back. Just learning to repeat what a person says is such a hard skill. When I've done this, led people in this in workshops, it's like, okay, listen to what the person says, repeat it back exactly. Or in couples counseling, this is one of the most difficult things. A partner will say, oh gosh, I wish you just spent more time with me. And then the mediator says, can you repeat back what she just said? And the other partner says, yeah, they think I hate them. It's like, whoa, that's totally not. But it's such a habit to overlay our interpretation, that interpretations, can be good or bad, but we have to know that we're doing that before we can work with that. It's nice to be able to choose. I'm going to give my interpretation rather than just have interpretations coming off on their own. So we can tune in. Well, what do I notice about this room? Oh, I notice that there's a mirror there, this. And then there's a whole other layer that's, I like this color, I don't like this color, etc. So what this eventually comes down to, why this is important, is we're actually getting down to this root of one of those types of closure orientation, which is the should, shouldn't mindset, the should, shouldn't mindset. And you can see this like all over the internet. This is what people open with. This is what people open with. So I'm going to eventually tell you, like, maybe let's express what our values are rather than saying should, shouldn't. But even if you wanted to say a should, shouldn't, please don't open with it. Open with empathy first. Actually make sure you know what you're talking about or that you can share some observations. So this is a foundation of rapport, is being with what is and observing without evaluating. We let go of the should. So someone comes to you with their problem and we go like, oh, wow, it sounds like that was a problem. It's quite simple, but it's amazing how much of this sense of connectedness you're generating, this capacity to observe together. Similarly, what last thing that this is going to do, our capacity to make observations without evaluations, is in our self-talk. This allows us to avoid things like catastrophizing. So let's say I had this happen last week. Somebody texted, hey, can we set up a time to meet? I'd love to talk to you. And my mind goes like, oh no, what do they need to tell me that they can't send in a text? But fortunately, I had this tool from my Zen training that I was able to go, wait a minute, what are the facts? What are the facts? And that might be a great mantra. What are the facts here? Well, the facts are I got a text. And then my mind will go off and I can separate, instead of immediately believing the catastrophizing, the automatic negative thoughts, the, rerun prophecies, whatever you've got, I can go, what are the facts? In your relationships, especially if you've had past trauma, if you've had bad relationships, this can save you if you're with a new partner from replaying the old partner or the old friend. You go, what are the facts? They did this with their face. And my mind thinks that means this and this and this. But all we know yet is that they did this with their face. When you bring that to them and you say, hey, you did this with your face, you're likely to get much better results than if you come in 3 steps down the road and say, why are you thinking these thoughts about me? Our mind reading, that's not how mind reading works, apparently, according to the yogas I've learned. So we learn to drop that. We learn to come with these basic observations. They're going to ground us in presence. So feel free, as you're doing those meditations from last week, resource yourself with what's going on. So for me, that's quite resourcing. It's just, fine, what's happening there? There's the molding on the wall. There's my computer. It's actually quite grounding to come into observations in the present moment without the interpretations. So this, just bring it home, back in Dr. Rosenberg's Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life, he talks about sharing what's alive in us, which he talks about as our feelings and our needs. These are the living parts of us. Our stories, we can't quite share if we're mistaking our stories for something that's alive. We can't share our interpretations of the past and future. We can't share our pet strategies. We need to share what's alive in us. Well, the observations without evaluations are also alive because they're centering in the living moment. We haven't gone into the future and assumed what's going to happen. We haven't gone into the past and interpreted this moment based solely on the past. We haven't gone into a dreamland of what we believe it means or what it believes to us. And we haven't gone into an evaluative, checked out state of thinking, oh, things are always this way or that way. Making a moral judgment on things like how bright the light is. Okay, so we're learning to separate evaluations from observations, and this is going to be a part of our developing rapport. So as you go through the day today, take a look at, if you get that text message, does the mind want to go into a should? Oh, they shouldn't have texted me and told me that they wanted to talk. Okay, we're going to withhold the should and be with what is. They did text you, and it doesn't necessarily mean all the things that you think it means. And even if it does, when it happens, that will be what's happening. So we're combining a little bit of Zen. The famous Zen phrase is as it is. And we just learn to settle into as it is. And we're going to combine that into our communication skill of learning to share an observation without an evaluation. So just watch the mind today. It's no problem to make evaluations. I liked that sandwich. I didn't like that sandwich. But we're just going to learn when we're making them so that we can choose to express our values rather than assuming My interpretation of the world is the way that it is. Let's see how you do. Drop a note in the comments. Tell me how you did. I would love to hear how this practice goes for you, and see you next time.